Danny from projectmanaverse.com, and in this video I'm going to share with you 10 common terms that are used on projects that a project manager should be aware of. So let's jump in. Now, on a project, there's lots of, in the project world, there's lots of jargon involved, there's lots of acronyms, there's lots of unusual terms, and if you're new to project management, it can be a bit bewildering sometimes when you hear all these terms and you don't really understand what they mean. And sometimes you can be in a meeting and someone can chuck a term at you and you're not really quite sure what it means. So it pays to just do a bit of research before you get stuck into your first project, so you're ready for these terms and you can respond appropriately if someone starts using them. So I'm going to go through 10 common terms. I will do another video that will have another 10 on there. I was going to do them all in this one, but I thought I'd split it up. So I'll start with the most common 10. So number one is the business case. Now, business case is essentially a description of what your project is doing. It describes the outcomes, it describes the purpose, it describes the length of the project, key risks and issues, and roughly how much money is going to be involved in doing the project. And that document is used to ask for the money to do the project. So that's usually a project manager responsibility. So you should be aware of that one. Number two is scope. You hear this term scope a lot, and scope is a really important term on projects. Scope basically captures what the project is looking to deliver. It puts boundaries around what the project is responsible for doing. And if you think of a little analogy to use, if you think of a scope, a telescope, and you've got a circle, if you're moving it around, anything that's in the circle your project is doing basically, and anything that's not in the circle your project is not doing. So you can capture the boundaries of what your project is delivering within that scope of the circle. So that's what project scope is. Next common term, number three, is scope creep. Now, obviously this is related to the term scope, but scope creep refers to the situation when your deliverables or your scope or your workload keeps increasing, keeps getting bigger and bigger. Ideally, what you should be doing is defining your scope at the start of the project, getting it all documented and agreed and approved and signed off, and then you baseline that and that scope doesn't change. But what often happens is a stakeholder in the business will ask for something else, a little bit of new functionality, another swanky application or whatever, but the scope will keep adding and you don't want to be in that situation. But that is called scope creep. It's a very common term in project management. Okay, term number four is RACI, acronym RACI, RACI. And we use RACI to, I suppose, describe roles and responsibilities on a deliverable or a document or whatsoever. I'll give you an example. Let's say you're producing a requirements document and you want people to read this document, approve it, sign it off. And what you should have is a little RACI table at the start of the document, which includes all the stakeholders you want to see this document. And in that table, you should identify, are they R, A, C, or I? R is being responsible. Are they responsible for actually creating that document or creating the requirements? A is accountable. Are they accountable for the document? So if something went wrong with the requirements on the project down the line and basically they're looking for someone to blame, they look for the accountable person, because the responsible person does the doing, they put the document together, they're responsible for delivering it, but the accountable person is usually like the project sponsor or the executive. They are accountable for that project if it's wrong, okay? Next is a C, that is consult. So does the person that's reviewing this document, do they need to be consulted? So going back to the requirements gathering example, you might need to consult a lot of people in the business to pull those requirements together. So they would probably be consulting this document. And the last one is I, inform. And that means that you just want them to see it. So you've done the requirements document. They don't really need to sign it off, or they don't need to have an input into it, but they should be informed of it, they should be aware. So you just send it out to them so they can see it, and you kind of tick that box, if that makes sense. So that's your RACI, RACI, responsible, accountable, consult, and inform. Next term is RAID log, as in RAID and then log. So RAID is another acronym, and it is risks, assumptions, issues, and dependencies. Those four key elements, or those four categories, are very important for projects. So you need to identify what the project risks are. You need to identify what the assumptions are on your project, because every project at the start at least will have a lot of assumptions just so you can get going with your project, and you should test those assumptions later on to try and prove or try and show they're no longer assumptions, they're just truth. Issues is when a risk becomes an issue and you've actually got a problem on the project in real time. And then the D, dependencies, is your dependencies on the project. So are you dependent on anyone else in the business, any other projects, any other mechanisms that your project is dependent on before it can do something? So you often have milestones in your project plan or deliverables in your project plan, and you can't start them or you can't do them until something else has been done, and that something else is your dependency. You have a dependency on that element, on that activity, on that area of the business before you can do the part of your plan, and those dependencies are really important. They should be captured in this log. So that's your RAID log: risks, assumptions, issues and dependencies. Okay, next term, number 6, is stakeholder. You'll hear stakeholder quite a lot, and it's a bit of an odd term and you've never heard it before, but it's very basic. Stakeholder is really anyone that has an interest in your project. They could be doing something on your project, they could be impacted by your project, or they could be a decision maker on your project. Next is project working group, number 7, project working group. And that is you see it as PWG often as an acronym. A project working group is usually the people that you pull together either to deliver the project. I usually have a project working group for the entire project, but you can also have a sub-project working group for one particular element of the project, especially if it's a big project. So if you have to deliver something, you need a certain amount of expertise, certain people in the business to be able to do that. You pull together a little project working group to be able to deliver that. But generally, the project working group refers to the project team, and you as a project manager will have your own project working group with your core project team and probably some satellite members out in the business as well that are still stakeholders. Okay, number 8 is steering group. Steering group. That's another very important one. It all falls into the project governance. So a steering group is the body of people, the body of stakeholders that are very senior, that will have the power on your project to make decisions and make calls. And you'll usually have a steering group, not so often, maybe like once a month. And in that steering group, you'll take the key status updates of your project, the key risks and issues, and the problems that your project is facing, any budget challenges, and any decisions that need to be made. They should go to that steering group, and they should be made by that group, and that should all be documented and captured for your audit trail of your project. Okay, term number 9 is quorum, and that relates to the steering group. So if you take a decision to your steering group to be made, there must be a minimum quorum on that steering group to be able to make that decision. And quorum is just the minimum number of people or senior stakeholders that are required to make that decision. And there'll be a list of, maybe let's say there's 7 senior stakeholders, and out of those 7, maybe 4 of them have to be the quorum. So a decision can't be made on that steering group unless 4 of those people are on that call. They form the quorum, and now that decision can be officially made and documented, and you can move forward with your project and take that course of action. Okay, the last term, number 10, is terms of reference. Terms of reference. In terms of reference, you will have let me just take a step back. So a terms of reference is needed for every key meeting on your project. And the terms of reference just outlines, captures what the purpose of the meeting is, who's in it, what are the inputs, what are the outputs. I'll do a separate video on this at some point, but terms of reference is a good document if you are setting up a new meeting and you're inviting people and they want to know what that meeting is about, what it's for, what's the purpose, what you're there to achieve. That terms of reference is a 1-pager, should explain all that. Okay, I've gone a bit over time there, so I'll wrap up the video, but those are your 10 common project management terms. Hope you enjoyed the video. Please give it a like if you did. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this one. And until next time, please take care.